What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Michael Schwartz. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, man.
Man, I'm excited. We followed each other on socials for a long
Yeah.
time. I feel like we've interacted for quite a while. This has been a long time coming. We get to sit down screen to screen here and have a
Yeah.
conversation.
No, it's true. Yeah, yeah. I've been following you for a while and just being like, man, he interviews such cool people.
I do, and that's why you're here. So
Oh, oh, thank you. Thank you.
Um, so if you're not familiar with Michael, you just wrapped up Armored from Clover Press.
Yep.
Issue 5 dropped on December 18th. We're gonna hop into that comic. But I kind of want to know first, have you always had a love for comics, like growing up as a kid, or or did it come later in life for you?
Oh my God. No, comics. I grew up with comics.
Uh,
Like to me, comics were like, so my dad is a huge comic book collector. So he always says, he'd have me in a carrier carrying me around to comic shops while he was hunting for Silver Age books back in the 80s. So like I literally grew up in comic book shops and comic cons.
that's fantastic. And I want to raid your dad's collection now.
Oh my God. I always joke, like when you die, I get your comics, right? And he's like, "Oh, you have to split them with your sister, who does not read comics." But I'm like, I'm getting Amazing Fantasy 15. I don't care. And I even wrote it on someone's Facebook. Someone was like, "What's the rarest comic you have?" And I'm like, "Well, my dad has Amazing Fantasy 15, and it will be mine when he dies." He found that comment. He's not friends with this person. He found that comment. He's like, "Oh, really?"
You're like, yes, it really will. That's kind of the same thing with my collection. I'm like, I don't know what is gonna happen when I'm gone because my kids are not like, nah, they're not gonna want them.
Oh,
So
damn.
he should be happy that he has someone chomping at the
Yeah,
bit for his collection.
exactly.
Oh man. So you've always had this love for it. You kind of where then did that translate your love for comics into wanting to create comics?
So it's a weird path because I feel like growing up, I always wanted to be a comic book
Mhm.
artist. Like I took art classes, I won art awards. And then when I discovered like I also was a big film geek. So like my dad also managed a video store when I was growing up for a bit and a chain of them. And so it was like film and comic books, horror movies, comic books. That was kind of my thing. And then in high school, I discovered that like there were Toronto, like I'm a Canadian and I grew up outside of Toronto, and I discovered there were Toronto universities that had film classes, and I was like, "Whoa, you can go to film school!" And I immediately stopped doing art and went straight into like making movies. I don't know what happened. I still read comics, I still had
Yeah.
pull lists. It just I was pursuing film far more than comics,
Mm.
and but I always was interested in it. Like even when I was in film school, I was reading comics to inspire me for like making short films. I don't know like why I didn't pursue comics anymore. Like I was pursuing writing and film, and then just, I hit a point. It's like a whole story, but I hit a point where I was like, I read more comics than I watch movies. Why am I not doing this?
Mhm.
And then jumped in and was like, I'm just going to do it. I don't know how to do it. I don't know like what the process is. I don't know how to get an artist. I'm just going to try.
And here we are. So
Yeah, here we are. Yeah.
man, uh, your dad has a comic collection. He ran a video store. He's like what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I should be interviewing your dad right now.
Yeah, I know. What's so funny is
What's
I
his
did.
email now?
Hey, you can bring him on. You can bring him on. Someone did, interview him for. It's like there was like a Tales of the Video Store podcast, and someone brought him and me on because I used to work at Blockbuster, so they like interviewed both of us at the same time.
And I'm jealous of you because you got to work. I was rejected. My application for Blockbuster got rejected. They had at the time in college they had those weird screwed up like application processes where it's like, oh, like do you like to hit people? No. Would you get hit? Like, and you're like, wait, what? What? Like, it was one of those, and I apparently failed their personality test, so I
How
couldn't work
dare
at a
they, man?
Blockbuster.
How dare they reject you? That's
Yeah.
awful. Yeah,
And
I
no, so
also,
look where you at now, Blockbuster. Where are
yeah,
you at
yeah,
now?
exactly. You're in the ground. I also was a projectionist for a while. back when it was actual film and I had to cut the like trailers together. That was wild. Yeah.
That would have been so cool. Like all the pop culture jobs like that I feel like I would have wanted as a kid and
I was
still
like trying
want.
to knock them off, you know? I was like,
You're
I
just
need
like,
all these
let's do it.
jobs. I'm collecting them.
Now all I got to do is work at a Toys R Us so I get free access to toys.
Do you got you're in the US, right?
Yeah.
Is there Toys R Us back now or?
No, they have that weird like pop-up stores in
Oh,
like
okay.
Macy's or something.
Not the same.
Not the same.
Come up to Canada. We got Toys R Us up here still, and we'll get you a job, okay?
Oh, perfect.
Talk boy.
I'm telling the as soon as we're done with this interview, telling the family we're moving to Canada. So, talk to me about your comic armor then, because is this your first foray into comics, or have you gotten to dabble in before?
No, this is my first foray. Like I said, I knew nothing other than I love them, and my collection is insanely big. Like I don't know, I'm beyond 20 some odd long boxes, I'm sure at this point. Um, it was like first I was like, I want this comic, like because I've written so many screenplays. I was like, this is not a movie, this is a comic. I want it to feel like a comic. I want comic readers to read it and be like, oh, this guy isn't some fake, he like that was like important to me because I can read comics and I'm like, I know this person does not know comics. They're writing this because they want it to be a movie or something. I was like, Armored is going to be a comic. I don't care if it ever goes anywhere else. It has to be a comic. And so like I was just like studying my favorite comic writer scripts. So I would like break it down. I had like an Excel doc with all these Jeff John comics that I loved. And I was like, okay, what does he do by this page? And I was just studying it. And then I just ended up writing it and sent it to a friend of mine who had uh, drawn some Marvel books. And I was like, what do you think? He was like, this is amazing. This is better than some of the scripts I've read from Marvel. So I was like, oh, thank God. Okay, it's not horrible. And then it was just a matter of like, I hired an editor, and then he ended up finding me an artist, and I hired the artist, and that's kind of how it happened.
Nice. So so you talked about, screenwriting and you wanted like, we do see that sometimes, right? We see people who are screenwriters, we see, that come into the comic book world. How do you differentiate like comic book writing and screenwriting? Because it sounds like they're separate things. And how do you then put on those different hats? What
So
separates it?
yeah. So for me, I will always use three act structure in doing in doing comics. Like I'll always probably, like a one shot is a one shot. Like that's a separate thing. But like when telling a long form story, I will always structure the character's story in a three act structure. That's kind of like that's kind of looking at it like macro
Mhm.
level, but looking at it like the actual writing is so different. Like when I'm writing a screenplay, I'm like I set up like the very basics, like I'm in a dining room, and then it's your regular dining room. If there's any specific story things, I'll like put in there's plates on the table just to there may be a story reason why I'm describing the plate.
Yeah.
In a comic, it's like I have to just I not only determine how many panels per page, I'm determining what's in each panel. Like you're more a director in comics. That's what I always tell people. Like I feel like I'm the writer and director. In
Mhm.
movies, you're just the writer, and the director has to determine angles. He has to determine all of that stuff, camera. And then the artist is more like the designer and the cinematographer and costume
Okay.
designer. So it's a
Yeah.
lot like that's the way but that's my perspective having worked in film for so long, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit different.
I
Yeah.
dig it though.
Yeah.
I dig it. You got to write writer director on your comics. So,
Writer director. I don't think people would like that too much.
hey, you're the director. They got to do what you say. So it doesn't
They
matter.
gotta do what I say. Yeah, I think it's a bit different, right? Because like this is my perspective also because I am funding this project myself. This isn't something like there's a lot of publishers who will pay the artist and and pay the writer a page rate, and then they get like back end or whatever it's called in publishing world. And with my comic, it's straight up. I funded this, I made it, and then I have a deal with Clover who publishes it.
Okay.
So it's
So
very different.
so you had it completely created and funded and then took it to Clover Press to say like, "Hey, put it out there."
A little bit. Like we
Okay.
still had to like I had I think just one issue in the can when I took it to Clover Press. That was
Okay.
it. And then they kind of told they immediately signed like really quickly. And then it was a matter of I think it was during the first Kickstarter campaign. We didn't have all the issues done yet. So like there was still a process involved, but
Mhm.
it's all fun like it's me just going into debt. And a
Yeah.
lot of publishers work that way. Like Image, you have to have like it's up to the writer or artist to figure out how are you going to pay for this? Is the artist going to donate his time, or is it the writer paying for the artist? And
Mhm.
so that's some of the things they don't really talk about behind the scenes, I think, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've talked a lot and we haven't even talked about what your book is yet. And if people haven't heard about Armored, what is it?
It is a book about a boy who finds a haunted medieval suit of armor. You know, I tell a lot of people it's a bit like Stranger Things kind of meets Aladdin a little bit because this haunted suit of armor is being haunted by a ghost that used to wear the armor hundreds of years ago, and the ghost has to train the boy. So he's a bit goofy, he's out of time, you know. He but there's also a mystery involved. Like the
Mhm.
boy's parents disappeared. He's been passed around from foster home to foster home. He's finally adopted by this family. And this family lost their kid 2 years prior, and there's this mystery involved as to how the kid died. These two other kids saw him die from this monster killing him, whereas no one else in town saw that, and they think the kids just made up the story. So, you know, while trying to find out what happened to this boy, our main character Andy goes looking at this castle where they say he fell off the top of it, and he ends up falling into this old tomb, and that's where he finds the armor.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-layered kind of story here. Yeah.
And gang, if that doesn't hook you yet, I don't know what will, because like that literally all happens in issue one.
Yeah.
Like it's jam packed. I remember reading issue one and I'm like, I didn't really know what to expect, because I kind of like, oh, it's a haunted suit of armor. I'm like, so I was like, maybe it's gonna be a little goofy kind. And then like 2 pages in, I'm like, oh, you're gonna just go right for the trauma gut punch. Cool, like awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another thing though. Comics keeps getting more and more expensive.
Mhm.
Like that to me was really bothering me while like getting my pull list every week. I was like, oh my God, in Canada especially. It's
Mhm.
like, it may be $4.99 in the US, but in Canada, that's like $7 now. So it's really, really tough, like picking up a comic and being like I can see why like comic sales may be dropping. Like my local shop, they're pre-order only now. So if I don't pre-order something, I'm like, I missed out. I missed out, damn it. And
Mhm.
so I was like, I have to tell so much story in the first issue. I hate picking up an issue where nothing happened. And that
Mhm.
kept happening to me. I was picking up these books and I'd be like, why? These are like huge writers, but I think they're so used to being able to tell stories long form and it becoming a graphic novel. I'm like, I don't have that luxury. I'm like a nobody in comic world. I need to like hook people in issue one.
Right. Do you think that changes your process of writing when it comes for writing a comic? Because I know like it happens, but like if you're screenwriting, you're telling the story you want to tell, and people are going to get to consume it all at one time, right? Very few people are going to buy tickets to a movie and then walk out, right?
Yeah.
It happens, but where I feel like comics, you get one issue, and if they aren't hooked, they're gone. And then like it's like they walk out of the movie in the first 20 minutes and go, all right, well, that was your shot. Like, so does that affect like that mindset at all creep in when writing comics?
Oh, for me, absolutely. Because I'm like, I think I see it a lot with with comic books. Like
Mhm.
again, I keep going back to three act structure, and I see it in comics. Like the inciting incident of a movie, the thing that sets off a movie, I see happen in a lot of comics by the end of issue one.
Mhm.
And I was like, I cannot like Andy meeting the ghost and getting the armor. I was like, that can't happen at the end of issue one. Like we need to know like who the ghost is. We need to know way more than that. And people do that so often where I was like, no way, that's happening at the middle. And there's a lot of writers that do that really well in comics, I find. Like Jeff Johns is kind of like, to me, he's a master at not only do you get you know, you get like an incredible page turn in the middle of a book,
Yeah.
but also the end of the book has a crazy cliffhanger. And I was like, I got to keep that up. How can I keep that up throughout this series? And I hope I did that
Yeah.
with some issues, but yeah.
That's so good. Where did this idea for this story resonate, like come about for you?
Oh, it's so hard. I can't. It's hard to know exactly when. Like I know it happened. It happened kind of early on when I had my first kid. It happened when I had my all my comic books stolen from my childhood.
Oh,
It all kind of it was all around the same time, but I didn't know what to do with the story. It was like it was just there. Like at
yeah.
one point, I've told a few people this. There was one point where, I just had this in my head. I didn't know what to do with it, but I was working at an animation studio and they needed ideas to pitch Jackie Chan's company and Jackie Chan. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this would work for like a Chinese character, and then the ghost could be Jackie Chan. I was like, oh, that'd be really funny, Jackie Chan as a ghost, right?
Yeah.
And so I I pitched that, and immediately it was rejected. They're like, no, Jackie Chan hates ghosts, and I'm like, you haven't pitched him. How do you know this? And this was like an American producer telling me this. I was like, okay, well, I guess that's done. I got to do something else with this project, and then it eventually became Armored. But I will spoil a little that that story is there. I do tell that story of that I had planned for that movie if it became a movie in issue 6 of Armored.
So good.
Now
So
that
good.
issue 5 is out, I will tell you that that story is told in like 6 pages. So yeah.
That's good because I'm literally now picturing, I'm like, what if Jackie Chan was the ghost in this comic book?
Well, you've read issue 5.
Yeah.
That last
Yep.
page, the Jackie Chan character is on that page. So yeah.
You what's also really surprising about that story, you are now the second comic creator I've had on that has had their comic collection stolen.
Oh my God, that's depressing to hear.
It
It's not.
is.
It's
Who's
not.
stealing comic?
That's so weird.
It is. It's the weirdest thing. It is the weirdest thing. Because I feel like comic book people are so nice. So like, if you want comics, why would you steal it?
I know. It was just really bad timing. We just had our second kid. We were sleep deprived. Someone broke into our garage. We didn't hear it. We thought it was a truck driving by. When the garage door opened, it was just like devastating. My wife lost stuff. I lost
Uh,
stuff.
ugh,
Tons of comics, man. Silver Age stuff. My dad's duplicates, he'd give me. Horrible.
man. Well, good thing you didn't have your dad's fantasy 15, amazing
Oh.
fantasy 15.
Oh my God. That wouldn't be in a garage, let me tell
No,
you.
no. So so you, like you said, issue 5 came out, your issue 6 is coming out. How long do you envision this story that you're telling?
Well, like I think the way we're treating the series, like I've talked to Clover about this, is it's going to be in like chapters, kind of. Like the first 5 issues is chapter 1. We're working on the next 5 issues, which will be chapter 2, which will be a self-contained story. So the first chapter really is about Andy,
Mm.
the character of Andy, who has lost his parents, and him trying to fit in this new world he's been put in. He's been adopted by these new parents. He has to go to a new school, and a lot of the kids kind of act like he's replacing the previous child. That's really present in this story, is like trying to find your place in this new kind of world he's in. Um, and that's what the arc is for him, is overcoming that, like
Mhm.
learning to remove those emotional barriers, and let people into your life, because this is a kid that's been passed around from foster home to foster home. He finally has to realize he's being accepted here, like. And so that's the first chapter. The second chapter is its own story, that Andy has a new arc he has to go through, and
Mhm.
it's really about friendship. And right now, like I would love to tell like 10 chapters. That's the goal.
Yeah.
But it all depends on, are people going to buy? If people don't buy the series that much. I don't care. I've already told Clover I want at least 4 chapters. So like 20 issues. Like I could end it in 20 issues, but I don't want to. I want it to go like
Mhm.
50 chapters. So we'll see. We'll see, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And how is it for you, writing for kids basically? Like, is that a tougher thing sometimes of trying to get into a mindset of a kid?
No, for me, it's harder to write for adults.
Okay.
I'm having I will say this. I actually wrote this when I first started writing it. I was like, this is for adults. I'm not writing any more kid stuff anymore. Like I every script I was writing in for film was an animated movie. Like it was like pretty much every 4 to 5 months I was writing a new movie for a producer. And I was like, I don't want to write another kids movie. But then as I was writing it, I was like, you know what? I want this to be like Stranger Things. I
Yeah.
Every adult I know watches Stranger Things, but also every kid, any like I have kids, they tend to watch up, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like they want to be watching adult things, and Stranger Things is kind of perfect because it's like it bridges the gap for adults and kids to watch. And I was like, that's what I want Armored to be. I want that bridge. And thankfully so many adults are enjoying it. At least
Yeah.
like the DMs I get, I'm like, thank God. Like people are like updating me. I read issue 4, and I like thank God. Like I really wanted it to be an all ages book, and I hope it succeeds in that sense, and I hope it continues to.
Mm. What's so funny that you talk about like how we as adults will gravitate towards YA books, right? Like still and
Yeah.
things like that because look at some of the most popular franchises are, like some of those still out there.
Harry
And
Potter. Yeah.
yeah, right? And then like the other aspect of it though, like kids like kind of aging up a little bit more of like watching. I remember before I had kids, I was like, my kids would never watch that. And I'd be one of those like very judgmental, like, really? You let your kids listen? Like, And now my kids are like in the car on the way to school, singing whatever. And I'm like, oh, my bad. Whoops.
All those swear words. Yeah, yeah.
So I do find it fun like that you have this kind of like, yes, it is it's geared towards like the Stranger Things crowd is a perfect analogy, right? Because that was something I watched with my wife. Like we weren't watching it as kids, and we loved it and we consumed it, and so it's a great world that you've created. Your mindset for the ghost, your comparison to him as the genie, spot on. Now, like that's all I can picture. Did you have like an influence of like kind of who you were shaping the ghost of the armor to be like?
Well, I think when so back in 2018 when I first had the idea, I remember telling like pitching my wife and being like, so my wife is also a writer. She writes in television, and I can tell you after we've been working on a graphic novel or comic series, and we're like 90 pages done. But I remember pitching her and just saying, it's like imagine if Aladdin had armor and the genie was just a knight from like the 1300s. And a lot of people, when I would tell them that, they'd be like, "Oh, that's a great idea." And so when writing it, though, I tried not to go too much genie.
Yeah.
I also kept thinking of, I'm a huge fan of Highlander. I was thinking of like, oh my God, what's his name? I'm not. Oh, who's the guy that teaches him in Highlander when he's
Is
it's that
not Chris
Chris Lambert is the guy is
is the
Highlander, but
it,
who's the guy that trains him in Scotland?
oh, we're gonna lose
Oh,
our nerd credibility here.
I know it's oh my God. Why is it? I just keep wanting to say Gene Hackman. I'm like, no, that's Lex Luthor. Stop it.
Is it Sean?
Sean Connery. Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
yes, Sean Connery. I
I was
kept
like, I was
thinking,
trying to. It's been so long since I've seen. I'm like, wait, was it Sean doing that one?
yeah.
Okay. I love how
I
also
kept
I'm like Sean, like I'm best friends with Sean Connery. I'm like, oh yeah, Sean.
Sean. You're a good bud. Yeah. Yeah. I was like thinking of that. I think I was subconsciously drawing from a lot of uh, movies and TV shows and comics that have that mentor mentee
Mhm.
in it. Like almost all of the famous stories have it. Like Star Wars even has it. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm sure it was just subconscious in there. I didn't actively think of it, but I know there's certain ones where I'm like, of course accidentally borrowing from that. And yeah,
Oh, for sure. I
yeah.
mean that it creeps into us all the time, all the media and art that we consume for sure.
Totally, yeah.
So
And there's
you've had,
sometimes I like to homage things. Like I
yeah.
you know like in my movie Gnome Alone, there's like straight up homages to like the movie House, the 1980s horror movie. Like straight up a scene is like, let's just do the scene from House. Let me put that in the script. And then, kids watching it have no clue, but then the odd parent will be like, that's from House, you know? And same with Armored. I remember sending Ishmael when he started designing things. I was like, oh, make it look like here's reference from Frighteners, here's reference from American Werewolf in London. It was like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you have this idea that you wanted to create it, how did you get connected with Clover Press? Like where was that the spot? Why was that the spot for this book?
Again, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, like I'll just send this to Image and they'll like it, right? And they'll like get back to me and say they want it or don't. It doesn't work that way. I actually find publishing really frustrating. There's some publishers that are incredibly amazing. Like they'll get back to you quickly and just be like, it's not for us. Like I can get a response from Netflix on a movie idea or Disney on a movie idea better than you can in publishing, I find. And I don't know if it's because there's more money in like TV and film where they have more staff. Like I know a lot of publishing companies are understaffed and there's just not a lot of people and there's not a lot of money in books.
Right.
But I found it so frustrating, man. Like sending my book out and then just like dead air, or oh, we don't have availability for another year and a half, and I'd be like, what? Like, what is this? My editor, he sent it to Clover Press because he had been working on a book called The Golem of Venice Beach,
Oh, okay.
and that book was going with Clover, and he said, oh, let me send them the first issue because we had just finished the first issue. I don't even think we had like final lettering at that point. Like we had like really rough lettering in. Sent it to them within like a day or two. Hank Canals from Clover Press wanted a meeting, and he's like, we want the book. And I was like, they knew not, they literally had no clue what my plan was for issues 2, 3, 4, and 5. At that time I still thought it was going to be 6 issues.
Mm.
They knew nothing, and they kind of just took it sight unseen. They were like, we want it. And I was like, wow, that's so nice. And they were so passionate that I was like, wow, you don't get this in film and TV. I'm like, I'm with Clover. They're awesome. And I knew they had all these plans for all these like Marvel Art of books. So they were working with David Mack, Alex Malev coming up. They have like David Nakayama books. Like the books they're working on are insane. And the books I know they have coming out that no one knows about, I'm like, these artists' books are incredible. So I was like, I want to be in with that. So
Yeah.
it was a pretty easy yes. The hard thing is not a lot of people know Clover. So they're like an untested company in some ways. They have a lot of graphic novels. They've released a few single issues, but single issues aren't their forte. So
Yeah.
it was hard to convince shops even like, can we pick up my book? Like I was literally going into like Golden Apple in LA or Forbidden Planet in New York, being like, will you carry my book? And they'd be like, yeah, let me write it down. Or you know, Midtown. I went into Midtown when I was in New York. I was like, my comic's coming out. Can you carry it? And they did. They
Yeah.
carried a lot of issues. So it was like cool. Yeah.
Well, that's got to be, it's always the struggle sometimes too, right? Of balancing these new books that are coming out. I think the benefit that you have is that it is that people can get it in shops, right? Sometimes I think that's always hard with, indie books of that are just Kickstarter based, like especially a lot of times doing interviews. If then like they have to wait 3 months, like if someone's watching this interview and they're like, I want to check out Armored, they can literally they should be able to go to a shop and pick it up. Hopefully they have it.
Yeah.
And
Or
if not,
that was the thing I liked about Clover too. Like their website, they sell everything on their website too. So if there's issues left, like I think Diamond is now completely sold out of issue 1,
okay.
but you could still go to Clover and grab it. So which is really really cool that there's still opportunities
Yeah.
to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, according to my Diamond is out, but you can still get the other issues and on Diamond too, so it'll work. So it's
It's
there.
close though, man. At
It's
issue 4, I think we're down to single digits on issue 4, and issue 5 is down to single digits. So
man. Well, let's sell it out at Diamond Gang.
okay, Let's
Make it
sell it out,
happen.
guys.
Let's
Yeah.
do it.
And
Man,
that was
go
sorry. The one thing that I also wanted to do, I don't know if I brought this up, was like I wanted to get like covered because I'm an unknown.
yes.
Ishmael's an unknown. We were like, my editor is friends with a lot of amazing artists like David Mack and Jay Lee, and he's like, do you want me to reach out to them? And you know, it's not a guarantee that they'll do it. You
Right.
have to still like the project. And when they all agreed to do it, and Nick Patera was one of the first who read it and was like, I want to do the main covers for this. It was just like, oh man, I'm in heaven now. Like these are like my favorite artists, all wanting to do a cover.
Yeah. You're looking, I'm looking at issues one, two, three, four, and five right now. And the covers artists that you have on the A covers are top notch. Like, and like it's crazy, like you said, as you're with Clover Press, which is no not many people know about that publisher. First book, Ishmael, like, and you're just like, oh, but here's our David Mack cover.
Yeah, I know.
It's
It's crazy. Yeah.
so
I
good.
know. It's like I've never CGC'd a book before, but I had to get, the first issue.
Oh,
Sorry, I think this is CBCS. I got Jay Lee to sign it when I first met him, and he signed the book, and then I forgot to get an authenticator, and so CGC was like, no, it's too late. But then CBCS was across from Jay Lee, and they just looked at Jay, and Jay just gave him the thumbs up. So they were like, okay, it's authentic.
that's so good. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, man, like how is that then aspect of you are a collector, you are a comic geek, like all of us, and you're going to the Comic Cons, and now you're going to cons as a creator, right? Like you have a book, you now have a slab book of something you created. Like, is it ever like a surreal moment for you?
Yeah, it's really surreal. It's
Yeah.
really surreal too because like I am because being a collector, it's like I've done a few cons where, I have a table, but it's really hard to stay at that table. Like because I've been going to cons since I was little. I just want to walk the floor and talk to everyone. And it takes everything in me to be like, just stay at your table, stay at your table, don't leave. Like people come, and I love staying at my table because I get so many people coming by checking out the book for the first time.
Mhm.
Or the best is like the amount of like kids, especially tweens that
Mhm.
age, have seen No Malone so many times that they're now like, wait, you're the writer of No Malone? What's this? And then I get to introduce them to Armored. So but it is weird. It's really surreal, man. And I have some like bigger cons that I'm doing next year, which I was just invited to the Toronto Comic Con in
Ooh.
March, which so now I'm like being invited to the big boy cons. I did San Diego Comic Con, but that was with Clover. Like I did
Yeah.
signings at their booth, but this is like me getting my own table for the first time at like a big con. So I'm
Nice.
excited. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll be at some of these cons stateside too. So,
Oh, I would love it. I mean, I need to do more. I'll be doing San Diego again with Clover, but yeah.
you know, well, Michael, I want to respect your time. Thanks so much for taking some time to come on and talk about comics with me.
Oh man, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? Yeah.
Are you I mean, obviously, so right now your full focus is on Armored, right? With you kind of maybe dabbling in some other stuff unannounced, but right now it's all Armored focus.
Yeah, like we just, but probably by the time this is dropped, I presume our half issue, we did an armored half issue, which is in the style of the old Wizard magazine half issues. So it's a flipper book where one side is a brand new armored story with like a ton of Easter eggs for kind of what's to come in armored. And on the back, the flip side, it's a Wizard homage where we do a whole bunch of Wizard style content, but like armored related. We do like a visual guide to collecting half issues. That'll be over. You can probably still like get like do a late pledge.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. I'm working on issues 6 through 10 right now of Armored, and I do have a book coming out with my wife. We're just shopping it around right now with publishers, but we're really excited about it. It is more adult, I will say. It's funny, but it is more adult. I'd say it's more like Harold and Maude meets the Frighteners. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So Yeah, we got some stuff coming out next year, you know, and I got a horror movie for adults coming out next year as well that was shot in Ottawa, in Canada
Awesome.
last summer. Yeah.
So, so good. Well, Michael, if people want to stay up to date with what you're creating, what you're working on, where can people follow along with you?
I would say Instagram at Mike Schwartz Writes or Threads at Mike Schwartz Writes and Bluesky at the Mike Schwartz. Yeah, and X. I'm on X still, so you can find me there too.
Yeah,
Whoever's left on X.
I, I'm, I'm still there. I'm still
Yeah,
hanging around.
yeah,
And
same.
is it just slowly everyone else dissipates into the wilderness? But well, Michael, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about comics with me. Again, go out, check out Armored if you haven't. And with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.